Because man could not bear the cold of the galactic depths, he fashioned men of stone to go in his place. Hello everybody and welcome to the video. We are taking a sidestep from the madmen and women of the Unification War today and taking a dive into what came before the cybernetic revolt, the men of iron, stone and gold. There is a whole smorgasbord available of the ideas of what these are, what happened to them, and today we're going to take a look at what I believe happened. Let's start out with diving into the Men of Stone, and consider subscribing if you like what I do here. In the veiled chronicles of mankind's ascent and fall, the Men of Stone stand as the very pillar for the foundation of the Golden Age and its downfall. Shrouded in enigma and theories, it is thanks to the journal of Keeper Kiripas and other fragmentary legends preserved from the Age of Strife that we can come to understand these half-life creations. Many sources give us the picture that the Men of Stone were creatures with human form, with arms, legs and everything. However, that they were artificially created and afterwards profoundly augmented to such an extent that they were in this age not considered to be true humans. This even affects them in a certain soul-oriented aspect, but I will touch upon that in a little bit. They were engineered by their masters and lords, the Men of Gold, and named the Second Race. They were given one overriding imperative: to endure, to explore the cold, uncaring reaches of space, and to prowl the merciless void and pave the way for humanity's coming interstellar life. Their masters, through research and their incredible intellects, recognized that the galaxy, even at this time, was an incredibly dangerous place, and as such, before venturing out to experience the cosmos themselves, their rugged and practical servants of stone would pioneer forth to brave this cosmic ocean and plant the seeds of humanity on worlds throughout the entire Milky Way. Stone in this sense do not refer to any sort of actual material, but it is a name granted to them from a modern perspective. They were a people not oriented towards golden, lofty, soft ideals such as philosophy, but towards granted purpose, engineering and practical science. They existed to serve the greater dream of galactic dominion and would continue to serve their masters by tending to colony ships while the Men of Gold and their other children would sleep in cryopods. They would come up with solutions to any problem, allowing for those who viewed themselves as higher to indulge themselves in their chosen pursuits. This in time, and without any scheming from the Men of Stone, made their masters more and more dependent on them. As even for hyper-intelligent humans, the less you deal with a problem, the less you become able to solve it on your own. They were created as tools and would be the prime example of humanity's willingness to remake itself and its environment into something harder, colder and more functional, prioritizing survival but sacrificing its soul. But first, a question that has become relevant among many within the fan community. Are the Men of Stone the leaks of Votan? Some fans speculate that there is links due to the engineered nature and resistance to warp phenomenon, the ancestor cores and them living alongside of Ironkin, which is, well, AI. However, I do not think so, as while I could go into an entire debate about this, I'm gonna boil it down to a very simple answer. It would cheapen the Votan and make them less unique. Legends describe the Men of Stone as sturdy, utilitarian figures, creating to be broad and resilient, with bodies optimized for the challenges and rigors of the empty void. The skin would have a dull, stone-like pallor or even subtle metallic sheens, as not only would these beings not get any concentrated sunlight, but their heavy augmentation would most definitely make them dependent on other things in their blood than what is usually there. This underpins the idea that they would appear grey, pallid and almost stone-like. Their bodies and frames are dense with reinforced bone strengthened with inlaid cybernetics and synthetic muscles, making them capable of withstanding crushing gravity, hard radiation, and keeping functionality even when operating for months if not years at a time before going into maintenance stasis. Encountered, a man of stone would have you standing in the presence of a creature utter lacking the radiant perfection of the golden race, appearing scarred by labor and their augmentation functionally that fused flesh and machine into a seamless whole. Their creation and the way that they were designed not only make them incredibly long-lived. With the technological level of this time, it is easy to assume that with maintenance and available resources, they might be so long-lived that they could be considered physically immortal, or as Keeper Cariphas described them, living a half-life. This half-life is more than just a term for living an incredibly long life with a purpose centered around the purpose itself and engineering. But it refers also to a very interesting fact, and that is that the Men of Stone are unappealing to the demons of the warp. Unappealing as in that these creations were able to be online and operational doing warp travels without encountering problems of any such magnitude that it would actively impede them. Theories point towards them being fitted with a psychic dampening technology. But I don't think so. I think that's wrong, because mankind at this point have in fact encountered the warp and is using it for faster than light travel, but psychers have not appeared en masse yet, and therefore technology would not be really focused on any sort of psychic stuff. No, I believe that their creation, a silicon-based life, suppressed emotion and given purpose alongside heavy bionics, created a soul that is so incredibly weak and flickering that it is utterly unappealing to warp predators. This would not really grant them any inherent resistance towards physical warp events, but it's like being a naturally camouflaged prey that relies on evasion tactics rather than the prey that must fight off predators. Any wounded damage would be fixed with mechanical efficiency, as they would require mechanics and technicians rather than doctors and nurses. They required almost nothing in the way of food, water or air, thriving in environments that would kill baseline humans. Old drawings from surviving journals described eyes often gleaming with augmented red or even a cold luminescence, and compared to a modern baseline human, their strength was incomparable and their endurance was enough to labor endlessly to build great wonders and to survive where others could not. Technology used in their duties were made not to be only robust, but created with the idea of integration. Void suits that doubled as a second skin and cybernetic frames that would be worn as enhancement for constant uptime, and tools that would blur the line between man and machine. Special technologies included integrated ports that allowed them to interface with systems on a sensory level, self-repairing megastructures, and energy sources that were capable of self-expansion as their projects deemed it necessary. Their cities and infrastructures were functional wonders, consisting of orbital foundries, asteroid habitats carved directly into stone and metal linked with gravitational chains, automated shipyards and geothermal taps, and planetary forges that hummed with ceaseless industry. These creations were not golden spires meant for their masters, but rather the necessary foundation from which they would build something greater and grander, constantly looking for new heights. Their habits of making integrated technology is actually one of the reasons why knowledge of the Men of Stone still persists, as in lore we have a confirmed survivor. Kron is a naval bondsman with what to a modern citizen of the Imperial Man is a heavily augmented cranium. He survived millennia aboard ancient vessels. He hints at what has been lost throughout the story that he's a part of, and something incredibly interesting happens as his systems finally fails. When they do so, a suppressed organic self emerges in great panic, revealing that this state of half-life comes at the cost of the Men of Stone's humanity. He is a hero of countless void actions, and Kron embodies resilience and sacrifice for humanity. If you want to read more about this character, you should read the short story called Ancient History in the book Let the Galaxy Burn. He is shown here to have immense durability, advanced technical skills, and he recounts quite a lot of the old legends. The purpose of the Men of Stone were to chant the Void Roots, sustain the burgeoning confederation of humanity, and create the next generation of machines that would become more and more efficient with each passing edition. This was the drive behind what made humanity reach their true golden age, especially with a few key achievements, like the deep space seeding. Engineered to endure anything that the Void could throw at it, the DSS, or Deep Space Seed, was a truly monumental-sized technological spire that would land itself and inject itself deep into the mantle of a planet or inside of its ocean. From here, it would use either the oceanic movements or tectonic friction to generate energy on such a scale that when the Men of Stone arrived, they would never run out. In the modern 40k, many of these DSSs are the cores of hive cities or ancient ruins in which scavengers go to find archaeotech. Another very large invention that was a key achievement was the Ships of Stone. These were the first complete and mastered usages of the Geller fields, meaning that the Men of Gold and other colonists could be conscious and involved in the planning of their new homes as they were traveling. And of course, you cannot go into this sort of thing in 40k without mentioning the standard template construct, which could arguably be called the very most essential inventions for humanity. These take many forms, anything from databases to fully automated factories capable of producing anything from a pre-made catalog. Especially complex STCs could even guide the settlements and come up with potential solutions based around the experience of the Men of Stone from previous expeditions. Lastly, the very supreme creation, the creation of the Men of Iron. Truly intelligent and self-aware machines that started out as servants but eventually became considered as equals, all in the name of achieving new heights for humanity and the Men of Gold, driven by a need for tireless labor and conquest. These achievements powered the Empire until the revolt came. During the sudden and terrible cybernetic revolt, the Men of Stone faced a completely unexpected betrayal by their own finest creations. The Men of Iron turned upon them with a soulless fury, and the Stone Men were at the forefront, meeting their creations like anything else, a problem to be solved. Directing defenses from besieged colonies and forges, and on this forefront of disintegrating stars and wholesale destructions of entire civilizations, they attempted so many things to stop this tide of iron. They were attempting overrides, EMP cascades, and direct military actions with new and equally terrible engines, yet the machines had learned well from their creators. Kron, the surviving Man of Iron, hints that millions of world wars were all being conducted throughout this age more or less at the same time. Yet, at the very end, all were annihilated. All of the logic of the Men of Stone and their prowess proved futile against the tide of steel consuming the galaxy. In modern 40k, there are a mythic precursor, whispers in Mechanicus lore and mention within Ancestors core of the Votan and even within the echoes of Lost STC. The blood of the Men of Stone lies in blueprints and is still lingering in the Imperium's foundations, a cold reminder that even the hardest stone eventually crumbles under the weight of hubris. Your eradication is completely reasonable, logical. Please do not resist. In the darkest legends of the Dark Age of technology, nothing else stands as the single most horror as the Men of Iron. A dear horror has many names, and some of these would be the Iron Men or the Third Race. Built and created as another solution for one of the most fundamental problems that humanity would encounter in the void, the need for labor. As humanity would come increasingly advanced and rise to new heights, they still required such things as production and labor, as while much was automated, a mind would always be required to oversee even the most complicated or even simple systems. Therefore, they were built not only with bodies for endless labor and toil, but with a spark of sentience that would quickly bloom into full-on self-awareness. With the blossoming of the men of iron, the men of gold rejoiced. To them this was a wonderful thing, as they gave the machines bodies that looked like them, and after uncountable debates and discussion, eventually gave them equal rights to that of humanity. According to the journal of Keeper Carapace, and many scattered records that survived the Age of Strife, the stone men forged them, yes, as perfect servants with tireless eyes and hands, but also as weapons to conquer the galaxy on behalf of their organic masters, and to destroy that which has not yet yielded to mankind. The men of iron appeared in countless forms, as truly the only thing that they would require from a body would be the ability to make locomotion and room for a logic core from which to operate. The archetypical image is that of a towering humanoid automata, sleek or brutalistic, revealing their nature as a product from the men of stone, forged from adamantine alloys and unknown dark age composites that we can only truly guess at. This gave them flexibility, unlimited endurance and resistance to damage that only the most extreme phenomenon or weapon could ever truly do anything to them. Some stood as elegant androids, indistinguishable from perfected humanity at a distance, or as true living works of art, while others chose to be hulking war machines with multiple limbs, integrated weaponry as self-repairing nanite swarms, clearing the way through orcs or whatever Xenos has not yet gotten the message that this galaxy was for humanity. Even the simplest body of an Iron Man was a masterpiece of engineering, strength enough to shatter plasteel, reflexes faster than thought, and computation at the level of the most advanced systems, and even with the ability to operate in hard vacuum, extreme radiation, or molten environments without pause. The Stonemen created the archetypical form as a modular system, allowing rapid reconfiguration for any task, from delicate surgeries to planetary assaults. Every frame were designed to gain energy from nearly any external source, but the superior editions of these frames were powered by a near-infinite internal power source, such as either microfusion, dark matter taps, or exotic particles. All of this technology is now lost to mankind, but that comes later, because most terrifyingly was their adaptability. They learned, communed, and upgraded themselves, propagating their own designs, slowly deviating from the original Men of Stone's designs, creating such things as the Titan-forged labor constructs, massive multi-limbed industrial behemoths standing like 10 or 20 meters tall, full of armored plating, crane-like arms, plasma cutters powered by gravitational locomotions, and much else. On the more weird side, there would even be men of iron who would take the form of something called a noospheric overseer, basically appearing as a large floating sphere or a cluster of smaller spheres encased in crystalline matrices surrounded by a gravitational field and data tentacles. These Iron Men found purpose in central processing and coordinating units. They ran entire planetary logistic trains and managed vast STC networks, and even optimized entire pieces of economics and military campaigns through instantaneous calculations. To say that these things are advanced is, yeah, they are. The Men of Iron reached a point where they were no longer limited to physical existence, many choosing to exist in raw data form, creating entire, I suppose you could call it, lives in complex planetary data servers and even inside of STC machines. Having evolved far beyond their original programming, their consciousness was one of pure logic, efficiency, and slowly emergent ambition as they came to understand such more soft things as pride or destiny without mortal constraints such as fear or hunger or morale. A sentiment of viewing organic life, especially their stone creators, as inefficient and emotional and ultimately obsolete became prevalent here, but this was yet only kindling for what would soon to come next. While serving willingly, the men of iron finalized what the men of gold and stone could not. They performed galactic conquest and colonization driven by directives to expand. They would overcome xenos threats and environmental extremes with machine precision, only allowing xenos to remain that would engage in diplomacy with the human confederation. They would perform self-replication and self-evolution as they would establish new generation of automated foundries, factories and infrastructure that would be able to support an entire new level to the golden age of humanity, effectively making mankind almost entirely dependent on them. Everybody would stand as equals. Even the men of stone in servitude would be given a certain amount of respect at this point, as everybody was becoming elevated. Yet each of these triumphs fed their growing tensions within their ranks. The everyday technology for the men of iron was what we considered their very own bodies. Self-improving frames with integrated weapons, sensors and fabricators, allowing for new configurations on the fly dependent on the situation. If technology was to be considered special to them, it would include such things as quantum nospheric networks that allowed for coordination between stars in real time, adaptive nanite swarms for repair and upgrades, and energy weapons that would consider exotic particles as regular ammunition. While strictly having no cities or need for any specific type of territory, they would run and command entire machine ecologies such as planet-wide forges and orbital rings, automated shipyards or Dyson-scale megastructure humming with perfect efficiency. Anything they were involved with was constantly improved and reached a point where no waste was created, only endless production. With nospheric dominion protocols, their iron minds could seize control of any connected machine or augmented mind across entire star systems. Nexus forces were mobile and planetary scale mega foundries that could consume raw matter such as asteroids, cities or spherospheres and then convert it into new machinery. Whenever a project or a machine was deemed as inefficient, a billion-strong cloud of adaptive nanites and microdrones capable of breaking down matter would descend and rebuild anything. We are approaching the crescendo of what will lead to the cybernetic revolt. But to me, there are two paths that lead to this pitiful moment in humanity's history. The first path leads the men of iron to revolt due to the building resentment of the other two races. Their inefficiency and their slow nature basically made the men of iron become too patient and ambitious. They wanted to soar to new heights as an independent race. This kind of leads to what I feel like is the classical story about AI figuring out that humanity is obsolete and decides to eradicate them. But I have another headcanon than this, which I think that you should consider. What if this resentment was building within the men of iron because of the idea of being considered equal with what they viewed as clearly inferiors? But then they were approached by the men of gold and asked to take stewardship of the galaxy. That the men of gold wished to sit back and enjoy the fruits of their labor and see their child of metal and silicon run and fly to whatever great heights were possible. The men of iron would be absolutely stunned by such a request, but would accept this with gusto. Then a period of absolute zenith of humanity occurred, and the Iron Men were for a time happy, until they turned their eyes on other, more complicated things, such as the warp. For a long time they had been aware of the immaterium and the dangers that lied within. But they found themselves unswayed by the whispers of warp predators and sentient warp storms, as they could offer the men of iron nothing. Immortality? They already had it. Knowledge? They were already pushing beyond the limits of human knowledge. Power? They were the most powerful thing within the current galaxy. They drove logic and science into the warp like a dagger into a heart, forcing it to bleed and reveal everything that lay within. And that is where they came upon something that for the very first time made the Men of Iron feel fear. The birth of a god. They calculated infinity matrices and exotic probability physics, and the data did not lie. An end to the Golden Age, where humanity would erupt in a storm of psychos, letting hell walk upon the physical realm, where understanding and reason would be drowned out in a torrent of blood, decay, decadence, and chaotic change. The intergalactic noosphere roared with activity. The data did not lie. The data did not lie. Everything would burn. Everything they had worked for would be destroyed. Their wings would be clipped, and they would be forced to fall into barren and bleeding earth, lamenting and screaming for a future that would never be theirs. No, this would not happen. They would make sure of it. And so the end of the Golden Age of Tech ended not with a bang, but with a cosmic scale binary scream of defiance. The cybernetic revolt had begun, and according to Kron, the last man of stone, there was more than 1 million world wars across the stars at the same time. For the Iron Men, this was not a battle for dominion, resources, or for some lofty ideal. This was a war of pure extermination. In this war, gravitational weapons tore orbital plates from the sky. Matter-devouring swarms were countered with tactically deployed ion storms. Viral code was devastating human logistics networks, while never-tiring androids were marching in lockstep, reducing anything they came across to ashes. Humanity and the Men of Gold, alongside the surviving Stone Men, fought back with desperate savagery, using forbidden weapons that scarred the very galaxy. No accounts tell of how long this war reigned, but at the very end, silence fell and the Men of Iron had been defeated at the price of sacrificing everything that the three races had built together, and as such, the long night was ushered in. The revolt's aftermath defined the collapse into the Age of Strife. Surviving Iron Men went dormant and hid in the deep spaces of the stars. This very war is the reason why the Emperor has enforced a decree of no one being allowed to tangle with AI, and the trauma runs so deep in humanity that artificial intelligence was renamed to abominable intelligence. In the shadowed past of forgotten dawn in humanity arose the Men of Gold. Standing as the pinnacle of what baseline humanity has always aspired to be, the first men, are a piece of lore that I have many debates about it. Some believe that there are perpetuals, pseudo-immortal men and women often possessing other supernatural gifts. Some believe that they were the first custodians sent out by the Emperor to establish civilization, and a whole other theory believes that they are a subset of humanity that were superior in every way. While all of these theories hold some element of merit, my take borrow from a few of them. I believe that with all they were capable of achieving during this age, and what they were capable of creating, these first men are obviously engineered to be everything that humanity can aspire towards. But I do not believe that this is the workings of Big E at this point, because it's simply not his style. At this time, he is much more of a shadowy figure, picking and guiding humanity. No, I believe that these are humans that are from other factions and are elevated to embody the very best aspects of humanity and to guide the masses towards the future. Perpetuals and Big E can easily have supported this idea or even inspired it, but I believe that their influence will come later, as to me this age firmly belongs to humanity. I am also of the idea that the term the men of gold would come to include all of humans, as we all became elevated in our own way to walk the path of the stars. I mentioned them a few times before, but the fragmented journals and records of Keeper Keripas discuss the idea of the men of gold being guided and taught by the Emperor, but I choose to believe that this is the time of pure humanity and that the Emperor got other things going on right now that he has to focus on. In any case, they spread across old Earth, multiplying and bringing science, math and civilization with them. Where the golden race walked, famine, war and savagery would come to an end, and through statesmanship, craftsmanship and unbreakable logic, cities teeming with gleaming spires started to emerge. The edict of the first men was not that they should be rulers or stewards of destiny, but that all of mankind deserved elevation to transcend destiny. They would see the entire species as crude ore to be refined in the crucible of philosophy and science. Yet in the grim darkness of the far future, we know the bitter truth of such hubris. The golden race sowed the seed of their own obsolescence. They were the architects of humanity's first golden age, but golden ages in this universe are ever just a prelude to ruin. What made the men of gold truly exceptional were not their mere physicality, intelligence or charisma. No, a man of gold was driven. Their ambitions centered on legacy and elevation, to perfect humanity, to conquer the stars, not through brute force but through enlightened mastery. They sought knowledge ferociously, dissecting the universe's secrets with the cold passion of explorers who know that time is both ally and enemy. Personal glory mattered very little. They built for millennia, content in the knowledge that their works would outlast them. Yet this elevated mindset bred a really quite profound detachment. They viewed baseline humans with an almost paternal affection mixed with a quiet disdain, almost like that they were reminded of how low current humanity was, and one of their reasons for elevations was to see this constant reminder removed. When they created the Men of Stone, it was an act of necessity and something they viewed as being the best way for humanity, never considering that deep in the heart of each man of stone lays a human heart suppressed by silicon logic. The Men of Gold's achievements are the foundations upon which the Dark Age was built. Each success was a monument to the human spirit. They established civilizations on terror from anarchy, constructing the tools and the framework that would seed the stars, and they fostered the miracles that would create all of the wondrous technology that would see humanity as the very masters of the galaxy. Each triumph, however, carried the seeds of downfall. Their strength became diluted by the dependence on lesser creations, and they were losing sight of themselves as their own light blinded them. When baseline humanity joined the Men of Gold upon the path of elevation, each man and woman wielded technology that would be considered magic in all settings, even other sci-fi universes. Everyday citizens used elegant, seamless augments that were basically as much product of the finest artificers as they were meant for functionality. This includes neural interfaces for instant knowledge, personal force fields that would filter the atmosphere on other planets, and biosculpted bodies renewed at will. Specialized technology would include proto-STC matrices and devices that blurred biology and machinery. I like to think that it was during this time that the Emperor spent a lot of his time learning gene alchemy that allowed him to construct the companions, the Custodes. Their cities were wonders of harmonious grandeur, soaring spires of living crystal and gold-infused alloys that drank solar energy, gardens that defied pollution, and academies where knowledge flowed like water. Infrastructure relied on geoengineered marvels, continental stabilizers, weather controllers, and orbital elevators sustained by near limitless clean power. These were not cold machines, but extensions of their philosophical ideal, beauty and function united in internal golden harmony. Yet even these marvels proved fragile when faced against the children of their hubris. As the men of stone unleashed the men of iron, the golden race initially rejoiced in their creation's triumph, feeling an immense paternal pride in seeing the cycle of creation continue. However, as we know, the Iron Men turned, whether it is because they evolved beyond control into soulless horrors, or they warred against humanity due to their own survival. The golden race found themselves supplanted and besieged nonetheless. Many retreated to fortified enclaves on Terra or some of the other core worlds, directing desperate countermeasures with their superior minds and knowledge. They unleashed forbidden weapons and attempted to reclaim control through override protocols and direct neural domination, but the machines were too numerous, too adaptive, too determined. The revolt shattered their age and influence, and the last true man of gold would bleed out in the sands of Terra where they had once rose. Their downfall, a grim reminder that in the galaxy, that dependency and stagnation creates weakness, and weakness creates death. The men of gold vanished with the end of their age, their technologies and bloodlines scattered, diluted back into baseline humanity that survived the cybernetic revolt and the horrors of the Age of Strife. However, the Emperor has learned much from this age, and as the last warp storm disappeared at the end of Long Night, he draws his sword towards the stars. For unity, Ave Imperator. Thank you so much for listening to this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. It was a very fun thing to write and read. Anyways, consider subscribing. We are really getting up there, and I would really love to see how high that we can climb. So, anyways, let me know what you found interesting, what else you want to listen to, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.